I flew back to London from Cape Town the next night. Tissues and crying. And then I thought, look, I've got to get a grip here and do something useful for Diana. And I decided the first thing that needed to be done was to find somebody to write and deliver the eulogy.
There is a man in England who has been sitting on one of the most valuable archives in modern history for nearly 3 decades. Private home movies, handwritten diaries, page after page in Diana's own hand, unseen photographs, footage of a princess before the world ever knew her name. And in all that time, through every documentary, every anniversary, every streaming deal, every network pitch, this man has never once unlocked that vault. Not for money, not for legacy, not for any of the hundreds of producers who have come knocking since September 1997. His name is Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, Diana's youngest brother, and until very recently, the world had mostly forgotten he existed. That silence is about to end, and the reason it is ending, the reason Charles Spencer has now spoken, the reason those 4 words he reportedly delivered to a Netflix proposal in early 2026 are reverberating across every royal commentary circuit on the planet. That reason goes far deeper than a rejected documentary pitch. Tonight you are going to hear all of it. The proposal, the vault, the guilt that has been quietly running every decision he has made since the night before Diana's funeral, the letter he reportedly sent to Prince William, and the question none of the mainstream coverage is asking loudly enough. What happens now that the gatekeeper has finally stepped into the light? Stay with me, because this one has layers. Before we go further, who actually is Charles Spencer? When did you last think about him, specifically? Not Diana, not Harry, not William. Charles Spencer. If you are being truthful, most people can pinpoint exactly one moment. Westminster Abbey, September 6, 1997. A global audience estimated at 2 billion people. A young man in a black suit walking to a lectern in one of the most historic churches in the world, carrying a piece of paper and reading words so charged with grief and fury and love that the applause started in the streets outside and rolled through the stone walls like thunder. He made a promise that day, not a general expression of sorrow, a vow. He promised that Diana's sons would be raised with warmth and imagination, that her blood family would shield them from the cold institutional rigidity that had, in his words, crushed their mother. He said it while looking directly at the Queen, at Prince Philip, at the future king, seated mere feet away. He said it with 2 billion witnesses, and he did not flinch for a single syllable. And then he went home to Northamptonshire. That is the last time most of the world registered his existence. And that long, deliberate invisibility is precisely what makes what is happening now so significant. Because Charles Spencer is 62 years old, the custodian of a family estate that has held its land for 5 centuries, and he has spent every year since 1997 doing something almost no other figure connected to Diana has ever managed to do. He kept his word. Think about the media ecosystem that has been built around Diana, her face on magazine covers, her dresses displayed in glass cases in museums, her voice in documentary after documentary, her image on postage stamps, on perfume bottles, on the cover of almost every book about the modern British monarchy. An entire commercial architecture has been constructed on the foundation of one woman's tragedy. And Charles Spencer has never contributed a single original brick to any of it. Every Diana documentary you have ever watched was assembled from the same pool of public domain footage, the same clips that have been recycled since the 1990s, the same photographs that every archive already owns. Charles Spencer has never loaned the originals. Not once. Not to the BBC, not to ITV, not to Netflix or Amazon or any of the American networks that have come calling over 3 decades. Now ask yourself the question that almost no one asks. Why? What does a man have to believe about protecting someone's memory to turn down that volume of money, that scale of public opportunity, for that long? That question is the key to everything that follows. Because when you understand the answer, When you understand what is actually driving Charles Spencer's silence, the 4 words he reportedly delivered to the Sussex proposal stop looking like aristocratic contempt. They start looking like the only possible response from a man carrying a weight most of us will never fully understand. The jewelry trail and the moment warmth began to curdle. It started the way so many things in this family seem to start. Small, beautiful, apparently innocent. The royal wedding. May 2018. The evening reception. Meghan Markle arrived wearing Diana's aquamarine ring, that unmistakable pale blue stone that anyone with even a passing knowledge of Diana's story would recognize immediately. From where Charles Spencer stood watching, it probably felt rather lovely. Someone new, someone his nephew clearly adored, choosing to carry Diana into the most important night of her own life. It felt like remembrance. It may even have felt like family. Then came the butterfly earrings. Then the Cartier tank watch. Then the gold bracelets. Piece by piece, appearance by appearance, item by item, each object that had once belonged to Diana surfaced on Meghan at precisely the moments where photography was not merely possible, but guaranteed. Major events, carefully choreographed arrivals, maximum lens coverage, every single time. Now, I want to be fair here, because fairness matters, and I want you to hold this thought carefully. No one can prove the intentions were anything other than genuine tribute. Grief does strange and tender things inside families. Meghan was newly married into one of the most emotionally complex dynasties in modern history. There is a genuine, human, understandable version of this story in which every one of those jewelry choices was exactly what it appeared to be. A daughter-in-law honoring the memory of a woman she would never meet, but whose sons she now loved. Hold that version in one hand. Now hold this question in the other. When does tribute become pattern? When does pattern become strategy? Once is tribute, twice is habit. But every single time, timed to a guaranteed camera? That is a decision. And the man at Althorpe was watching. Keep that in mind. Because the jewelry was only the opening act. What came next is where, by most accounts, the warmth reportedly began to curdle into something a great deal colder. The Oprah interview and the ghost in the architecture. March 2021. You remember it. The entire planet remembers it, but I want you to remember it the way Charles Spencer reportedly watched it. Alone. From the house where Diana grew up. The lighting was low and golden. The setting was soft, intimate, confessional. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one faceless institution that had, she said, silenced her, dismissed her mental health, left her isolated with no door open except the door to the public. If you know Diana's story, the chill of recognition hits immediately. Because that is, almost beat for beat, the architecture of Diana's 1995 Panorama interview. Run the comparison yourself. A royal wife isolated. Speaking of an institution deaf to her suffering. The palace has closed every door, so she goes directly over its head to the public through one trusted interviewer. Hushed lighting. A confessional stillness. The sense of secrets finally escaping into the air. Every element rhymed. The lighting rhymed. The grammar of victimhood rhymed. The casting rhymed. One woman, one sympathetic interviewer, one faceless institution. There is only one element that changed between 1995 and 2021, and it is the most telling difference of all. Diana gave her interview while trapped inside the system with no exit in sight and everything to lose. The 2021 version was filmed from a villa in Montecito, California. After the exit, with a production apparatus attached, and a streaming deal already negotiated. The original was a cry for help. The remake, whatever else you choose to believe about it, was a launch. And watching from the house where his sister grew up, Charles Spencer reportedly did not experience that hour as a tribute. How could he? Because of what you are about to hear next. Something about this man's history with Panorama. A history so painful and so personal that it explains with absolute clarity everything that happened after. The secret, the guilt that built the vault. This is the part of the story that most royal coverage never touches, and it is the key that unlocks everything else. By long-standing accounts, it was Charles Spencer himself who first brought his sister into contact with Martin Bashir, the journalist behind that 1995 Panorama interview. The same interview the world now knows was obtained through forged documents and calculated psychological manipulation, fabricated bank statements, fake evidence of surveillance, manufactured proof of betrayal. All of it designed to convince a frightened, isolated woman that everyone around her was an enemy and that her only safe move was to sit in front of a camera and bleed for the nation. Diana's vulnerability was not incidental to that broadcast. Her vulnerability was the product, and her younger brother, by these accounts, had unwittingly held the door open. When the full truth about how that interview was engineered finally came to light years later, it reportedly hit Charles Spencer like a landslide, because it meant that he, however innocently, however unknowingly, had played a part in one of the most profound exploitations of his sister's suffering during her lifetime. Think about what that does to a person. Think about it carefully. You spend your entire adult life believing you are your sister's protector. You stood in Westminster Abbey in front of 2 billion witnesses and told the world you would shield her sons from the machinery that damaged her. And then you learned that the single most psychologically damaging media event of her final years walked through a door that you opened. Everything since, by every account, has been an act of atonement. The sealed archives, the refusals decade after decade, the decision to bury Diana at Althorpe rather than hand her resting place to the institution, the unseen home movies, the handwritten diaries that nobody outside the Spencer family has ever read. He has been doing penance, making absolutely certain that nothing like Panorama can ever happen to Diana again, even in death, even now, even 30 years later. And in doing so, he has achieved something extraordinary, something almost no famous figure of the modern era has been granted. He has protected Diana's mystery. There is a private Diana the world has never consumed, a real, unguarded, fully human version of her. And she exists only because one man has been saying no for 3 decades. Now put yourself in his chair. You have spent 28 years atoning for one introduction. You have turned down every network, every publisher, every production company, every offer. And then a courier arrives with a proposal. The pitch and why Charles Spencer called it a joke. Let me tell you exactly what was reportedly inside that proposal, because once you hear the full list of what they reportedly asked for, the response stops looking like contempt and starts looking like the only rational answer a man in his position could give. The pitch was a grand anniversary documentary for 2027. 30 years since Paris, 30 years of grief, 30 years of unanswered questions. An emotional, cinematic, definitive Diana film fronted by her own son. On paper, it sounds compelling. Netflix reportedly loved it immediately. The streaming budget was described as substantial. The intent, on the surface, appeared to be a love letter to Diana's memory. But here is what the project reportedly required. They wanted Althorpe itself, the childhood home, the grounds, the lake, the island. They reportedly wanted access to Diana's personal handwritten diaries, pages she wrote for herself, never for an audience, never for publication. They wanted home movies that have never been seen publicly, the unguarded footage, the real private Diana that no one outside the Spencer family has ever touched. Without those elements, this would be just another history documentary assembled from the same recycled clips as every other one made in the last 30 years. With them, it would be the definitive Diana film of the century. And there was one more thing. One angle. The angle that made the pitch truly irresistible to the people selling it, and reportedly catastrophic to the man reading it. They reportedly wanted to draw a straight, explicit line between Diana's war with the establishment and Meghan's war with the same forces, to position Meghan Markle as the modern continuation of Diana's story, the 21st century version of the woman who refused to be silenced, Diana's halo, formally transferred. Think about what Charles Spencer saw when he read that. He had watched the jewelry. He had watched the Oprah interview. He had watched the Netflix documentary series in which a couple fleeing the media framed themselves explicitly as hunted by the same machine that destroyed Diana. He had watched, piece by piece, as Diana's tragedy was converted into someone else's origin story, without a single phone call to Althorpe. And now they wanted the vault, the diaries, the island, the originals, to crown a successor. Of course he said what he said. Honestly, the only surprise is that he kept it to 4 words. Is this a joke? Those 4 words were not arrogance. They were not old money contempt for the cameras. They were 28 years of grief and guilt and atonement compressed into a single sentence. The Sussex Empire on the edge. Why this documentary mattered so desperately. To understand why this particular documentary mattered so desperately to the Sussex operation, you need to look honestly at the state of their media empire in early 2026. The $100 million Netflix deal, the 5-year arrangement that bankrolled the California dream, had been hanging by a thread. The flagship project meant to steady the ship was the lifestyle series with love, Meghan. Instead, it became the iceberg. The reviews arrived thick, fast, and brutal. The Evening Standard gave it 4 stars and still found room to mock it on the way out. The Times awarded 2 stars and described it, and this phrase genuinely deserves to be preserved as surely dull. The Daily Telegraph also landed on 2 stars, calling it an exercise in narcissism filled with extravagant brunches, celebrity pals, and business plugs. And then there was The Guardian. Pay attention here because this matters. The Guardian is no royalist publication. It is a paper that has long favored reform of the monarchy and has repeatedly and forcefully condemned the treatment of Meghan over the years. If any outlet in British print journalism was predisposed to love this show, it was The Guardian. They gave it 1 star. One of their critics suggested it might be the last thing Meghan ever makes for Netflix. When the entire spectrum of British media, from Republican broadsheet to Royal Fan Weekly, converges on the same verdict, that is not a review problem. That is a product problem. Now here is the detail that sharpens everything. The couple's debut documentary, Harry and Meghan, which unpacked their exit from royal life, remains the most watched debut in Netflix history. That single fact is the skeleton key to this entire saga. Their subsequent projects, Heart of Invictus, Polo, With Love, Meghan, each met progressively cooler responses. The message from the audience could not be louder if it were written in the sky. The world is not interested in Meghan's lifestyle brand. The world is interested in royal wounds. The only Sussex product that has ever genuinely sold is proximity to the crown and to Diana, which is precisely why, when the brunch economy collapsed, the pitch deck reached for the deepest royal wound there is. The Netflix deal was reportedly due to expire with renewal anything but certain. The Spotify arrangement had already folded. American Riviera Orchard, the lifestyle venture, was not gaining the traction needed. According to royal commentator Ian Pelham Turner, losing Netflix would represent a major blow from which recovery would be immensely difficult. Do you see what the Diana documentary actually was? It was not a passion project. It was a rescue flare. The single card in the deck guaranteed to draw a global audience, because it was the only card printed with the one royal story bigger than their own exit. And the man at Althorpe tore it up with 4 words. The brand audit, how Diana became unlicensed currency. Let me give you a frame for what was really happening beneath the surface of all of this. Strip out the emotion for a moment and look at the assets. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties and surrendered the use of their HRH styles, they had to build a commercial life on something. What they had was fame with an expiry date, and one asset more bankable than every other combined: Diana. Her face, her myth, her martyrdom. In business terms, the Sussexes had been trading on a brand without a license, because the actual licensor, the keeper of the archive, the controller of the estate, the owner of the originals, was a 62-year-old man in Northamptonshire who, apparently, nobody in the Sussex operation had thought to consult. Watch the escalation in the ledger. 2018. The aquamarine ring at the wedding reception. The first borrowing. Received warmly. Felt like family. Then the butterfly earrings, the Cartier watch, the bracelets, each time to a guaranteed photograph. 2021. The Oprah interview. The panorama architecture rebuilt from the ground up. Diana's template, repurposed. Then the Netflix documentary series. Her tragedy converted into their origin story. Diana as the justification, the framework, the foundation. And finally, 2026, a request for the vault itself. The diaries, the home movies, Althorpe as a film set, the halo, fitted to a new head. They began by borrowing her jewelry. They ended by asking for her soul. Each withdrawal was larger than the last. Each one was made without consulting the man who keeps the account. And the final one bounced. Here is the thing about unauthorized withdrawals. They work beautifully until the day you need the bank manager to approve a real loan. And the bank manager, it turns out, has been watching every single transaction. The letter, the move, nobody saw coming. Now we arrive at the piece of this story that transforms everything. The development that most royal coverage has either missed entirely or buried in a single paragraph. Charles Spencer, by all accounts, did not stop at rejecting the proposal. He reportedly did not make his decision in a vacuum. Sources close to the palace have been quietly describing a relationship that most royal watchers have been sleeping on completely: the understanding between Diana's brother and Diana's eldest son. It is no secret that Prince William has been privately furious for years about the commercialization of his mother's image.
It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said.
But understand William's position. He is the future king. Every action he takes produces consequences. He cannot publicly block his own brother's media projects without manufacturing a global headline about palace censorship and family warfare. When the institution blocks something, it always reads as the establishment protecting itself. But when Diana's own brother, the man who stood in Westminster Abbey and vowed before 2 billion people to protect her sons, calls a project a joke, that is not institutional control. That is family honor. Nobody can spin it. There is no palace to blame. There is only one brother telling another brother exactly what he thinks of what is being done with their sister's memory. Do you see the elegance of it? The one man free to say no is the one man whose no cannot be weaponized. William never had to lift a finger. And I would suggest to you that this is not coincidence so much as alignment. Two guardians of the same memory arriving at the same wall from different directions. Think of it this way. When two governments cannot speak to each other without losing face, the message travels through a back channel. A private citizen, an elder statesman, someone with standing on both sides and a uniform on neither. The envoy says the unsayable precisely because he holds no office. That is exactly the role Charles Spencer now occupies in this family conflict. He has standing with the public, blood ties to both princes, moral title to Diana's memory, and no constitutional position whatsoever. The palace cannot tell Netflix no without a scandal. William cannot tell Harry no without a headline. But the Earl of Northamptonshire can tell everyone no in 4 words before breakfast. And the only institution that takes the hit is Montecito. And then came the move nobody saw coming. In a discreet but remarkable step, Charles Spencer is said to have written to Prince William, urging the future king to publicly address the deepening crisis between Prince Harry and the royal family. And before anyone mistakes this for a peace overture, let me be direct. By all accounts, this plea was not about emotional reconciliation. It was about strategy, stability, the global standing of the British monarchy. The reported contents are striking in their clarity. The silence cannot continue. Harry, in the eyes of the world's media, has become a symbol of weakness. No longer seen as the soldier, the prince, the statesman, but as a reactive figure consumed by the story of his wife. Spencer reportedly warned that by ignoring Harry completely, treating him with total indifference, the royal family is handing the Sussexes an open microphone, letting them dominate the global story unchecked, while traditional royal values are mocked in real time. Read that again. Let it land. Diana's brother, the man who once stood at her funeral and challenged the Windsors to their faces, is now reportedly urging the future king to defend the crown's image. If you wanted a single data point to measure how completely Harry and Meghan have rearranged the loyalties of this family, there it is. The state of the family and the question of trust. Meanwhile, the deeper family fracture has not moved, not an inch. According to recent reporting, the royal family is open to some form of peace talks with Prince Harry, but remains extremely reluctant to reconcile with Meghan Markle. Just weeks after Harry sent aides to London to meet with King Charles's communications secretary, it emerged that the core of the rift comes down to one word: trust. There is none. The royal family's greatest fear, and I want you to sit with this, because it is extraordinary, is not Meghan's anger. It is not her grievances. It is her content calendar. They are afraid that any private conversation they have with her becomes raw material for the next media venture. Every honest moment, every family exchange, every quiet word over dinner, all of it potentially filed, packaged, and turned into a streaming product within 18 months. The same reporting suggests Harry may eventually find himself traveling to the United Kingdom alone, without Meghan, without Archie and Lilibet, if he wants any kind of relationship with what remains of his family. King Charles has maintained a deliberate silence across the 5,000 miles separating him from his youngest son, even as Harry has reportedly offered to share his diary dates with the family as a gesture of transparency. William and Catherine have not spoken to the Sussexes in years. That is the inheritance of this saga, not a documentary, not a streaming deal. Two brothers who cannot find a road back to each other, and a family watching from Althorpe with a gate that stays locked. Both sides of the argument deserve a fair hearing. Before you pick a position, I want to give both sides of this argument the full weight they deserve. On one side, those who back Charles Spencer and Prince William argue that Diana's story has been told and retold across thousands of hours of documentary content spanning 30 years. That converting her memory into a content pipeline risks trivializing the emotional weight of her death. That the 30th anniversary should be a moment of private reflection, not a premiere with a marketing plan and a Montecito production credit attached. On the other side, Harry's defenders raise a case that deserves a proper hearing. Diana shaped both of her sons equally. Harry carries a dimension of the historical record that nobody else alive can supply. What it was actually like to be her child, to hold her hand through hospital wards and homeless shelters, to lose her at 15 and carry that loss in full public view for the rest of your life. Nobody can take that perspective from him. Nobody should. But try standing in both pairs of shoes before you decide. Imagine you are William. The most painful event of your childhood is being scheduled as a content drop, with a premiere date and a Netflix algorithm by your own brother's production partners. You never consented to your grief being a product. You never agreed to your mother's death being a launch event. And yet here it is, being packaged and pitched in boardrooms you were never invited into by people who will profit from the worst day of your life. Now imagine you are Harry. You are told that the story of your own mother, the woman who took you to homeless shelters specifically to teach you what your privilege was actually for, is somehow not yours to tell. You watched her die. You walked behind her coffin at 13 years old in front of the entire world. You carried that grief through your entire adult life, through wars, through scandals, through the very public unraveling of your place inside a family that seemed incapable of acknowledging how broken everything had become. And now you are being told that even your memories are subject to someone else's approval. Both of those positions hurt. Both are human. Both are true simultaneously. And the uncomfortable reality is that this conflict may never be resolved, because it is not really a conflict about a documentary at all. It is a conflict about ownership, about who gets to tell a story when that story belongs, in different and equally legitimate ways, to more than one person. The villain in this story, if you want one, does not live in Althorpe or Montecito or Kensington Palace. It lives in the commercial machinery wrapped around the grief, the apparatus that looks at a mother's handwritten diaries and calculates their streaming value, the algorithm that turns a family's worst years into a debut documentary that breaks platform records, the industry that has spent 30 years building an economy on Diana's tragedy and then acts surprised when the people closest to her tragedy want a seat at the table. That is what Charles Spencer has been fighting for 28 years. Quietly, with no press releases and no applause. Closing the loops. Let me close every thread exactly as promised. Loop 1. What was inside the pitch? A 30th anniversary. Diana documentary for 2027 that asked for Althorpe, the private archives, the handwritten diaries, and the unseen home movies, built to position Meghan Markle as the 21st century continuation of Diana's story. Pitched at the precise moment the Spotify deal had collapsed, American Riviera Orchard was stalling, and the $100 million Netflix arrangement was expiring. Loop 2. Why did the gatekeeper say no? Because Charles Spencer reportedly carries the guilt of having introduced his sister to Martin Bashir and watched her vulnerability turned into a television product through forged documents. He made a private vow afterward that nobody, not a journalist, not a network, not a nephew, would ever harvest Diana's pain again. Every refusal since has been an act of atonement. Loop 3. The letter. Far from siding with Harry, Diana's brother reportedly wrote to Prince William urging the future king to break his silence and defend the crown. Because in Spencer's view, Harry is no longer the threat. The unchecked story is. The question left on your table. Is it ever right to spend Diana's legacy as currency, even by her own son? Was Charles Spencer right to slam the vault shut? Or does Harry's grief give him a claim that no gatekeeper, however principled, can override? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I genuinely want to know where you land on this. But carry this line out of here with you, whatever you decide. Diana was exploited once by a man with forged documents and a camera. Her brother has decided she will not be exploited again by a man with a streaming deal and a rescue plan. The vault at Althorpe stays shut. And perhaps that is the most powerful statement anyone connected to Diana has made in 30 years. Not a documentary, not an interview, not a carefully worded press release. Just a locked gate and a man who refuses to turn grief into content. In a media landscape built entirely on doing exactly that, the silence itself has become the loudest thing in the room. The question now is what a desperate Montecito does next. Whether Netflix walks away for good, whether Harry eventually makes that journey to London alone, and whether William, prompted by the man who stood at his mother's funeral and looked the crown in the eye, finally breaks his own silence. The moment anything moves, you and I will be the first to talk about it. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I will see you in the next one.